Hello? We'll be beginning momentarily.
So David, you're going to welcome everyone. Okay, great. And people are going to speak from here.
You and I will speak from here.
They do not have a microphone.
They have
They have
lapel mics.
lapel mics. Wonderful.
So they'll be
Okay.
speaking from there, right next to the sign translator.
Terrific.
And this is your water, I think.
It is. It is my water.
Welcome to the Hill Havurah. We're thrilled that you all could make it. We have a wonderful program for you tonight with Council Member Silverman giving the introductions. And we have a wonderful panel. We have a fabulous sign interpreter, Rachel Silverman, on the right, on your left. We welcome all of you in the audience, those watching on YouTube as well as those here in person. Remember that we have refreshments in the back, each reflecting a member of the panel. The panelists will say a few words about themselves, about their Jewish communities, where in the world they are, how they got there, how personally they got to here to Washington. I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll open questions to you in the audience, here in person, and everyone watching on YouTube. For those on YouTube, just post your question in the chat, which should be to the right of your YouTube video or below it. We won't get to every question, but feel free to ask whatever is on your mind, whatever you've wondered about. No question is off limits. Councilmember Silverman will introduce the panel. Councilmember Silverman.
Thanks so much, David. Well, good evening to everyone. Good to see people in person. Good to see the panel, and certainly hello to everyone on the internet. So I am here to introduce our participants, our speakers tonight. I will just say as an introductory comment, one of the things I love about Hill Havurah is our emphasis on inclusion. Inclusion in terms of the Jewish experience, that Judaism is not homogeneous, and that people come to it in many different ways. Some people are born into Judaism and it's a family tradition. Some people actively choose it. Some people marry into Judaism. And I'm just going to point out Lori Solnick, who always makes a comment at high holiday services about the spirit of inclusiveness of the Havurah. And I think tonight's event represents those values of diversity and inclusiveness that I think is so embraced by this congregation, including, I know a lot of us Saturday night were together celebrating Sheldon Harris. And to me, again, the spirit of this congregation is having Sheldon there to give you a big hug at the beginning of services. I hope that our panelists might be able to experience that one day if they haven't already. But let me not delay why we're here any further. So let me introduce both our speakers and our signers tonight. So first, this is a real Silverman-dominated event. I want to introduce our American Sign Language interpreter, Rahel Silverman. Great to have another Silverman here. Thank you, Rahel, who has a very impressive resume of her own. She has a master's degree in interpretation from Gallaudet University, our home university. And years before, some of you might have seen Coda, which was the 2022 Oscar winner. Rahel pioneered signing song lyrics on screen and stage, working with a range of artists from Garth Brooks to the boss, Bruce Springsteen, and also, well, apparently a lot of country music at Opryland Hotel with Vince Gill. She's also produced award-winning business and art videos. So thank you so much, Rahel, for joining us today. We have 3 speakers, so I'm going to give a short intro. My understanding is to give a short intro to each speaker as they speak, and then we will open up for questions. Is that right, David? Yes. Okay, great. So our first speaker is going to be Nassim Rubin. Right, Nassim? Yes. Okay, great. We had a little change in the lineup. So Nassim was born and raised in Ahmedabad, India, a city of more than 8 million north of Mumbai. Nassim belongs to B'nai Israel, the largest of India's 3 Jewish communities. The B'nai Israel traced their origin to a voyage from the ancient kingdom of Israel, shipwrecked near Mumbai around 175 BCE. Survivors settled in the area. In India, Nassim worked as principal commercial officer of the British and Israeli diplomatic missions. The American Jewish Committee named him a Goldman Fellow in 2003. In that position, Nassim organized meetings between Indian and Israeli lobbyists, joint trips to Israel and India, and Hanukkah dinners at the Indian ambassador's residence. Nassim now serves as an assistant director of the American Jewish Committee's Asia Pacific Institute. There he builds partnerships between the U.S., Israel, and Asia, especially India and the Indian American community. He has been profiled in the Wall Street Journal and the Jerusalem Post. So it is my pleasure to first introduce Nassim Rubin to speak to us about his Jewish experience.
You can hear me? Shalom. Should I go there?
You can take it with you.
Or can you hear me? If I speak in the, you can hear me, right? So good evening, shalom and namaste. Thank you, Councilwoman Silverman, for introducing me. Thank you, David, for pursuing us over the last month and getting us here. And thank you, Alan, and all your Hill Havura members. Very honored to be here. As you can see from how I appear, I am from India. I am Jewish. And India is, we have a rich, like our brothers and sisters in Ethiopia and in the Middle East and North Africa, we have a rich Jewish heritage. Our oldest synagogue in India was built, the one that is currently standing is in Cochin, if you haven't heard the name of the city. And it was built in 1458. So the synagogue just completed about 450 years. Of course, now there's very few, about a dozen or 20 Jews live there, old folks. Most of the community migrated to Israel. And Israel is home to about 20,000 Jews of Kochini descent. If you have been to the south, there's a moshav called Nevatim. And that is one of the most successful moshav that exports flowers and fruits. It's a Kochini Jewish moshav. There are some Kochini moshavim near Jerusalem in the north. And if you find a really dark-skinned, staffer on the Knesset, most likely he's the Ethiopian or they are Indian from Cochin. I'm also now coming a little north in the main commercial city of Mumbai is where my family originated. Mumbai is India's commercial capital. In those times also, it was a seaport. And that is where the British first came to Surat, then they came to Bombay. And Bombay was, now it's known as Mumbai, it was known as Bombay then. So we were there much long ago, but in recent years, 200 years ago, the Iraqi Jews came. Remember, the Middle East is unstable today. It was no different than those 200 years ago. And the Baghdadi Jews saw an opportunity in British-ruled India about 150 years ago, 200 years ago. They saw an opportunity of stability, of an active Jewish life already present on the ground. We had our synagogues, they built more synagogues, and the Sassoons and the Kaduri families and many other Baghdadi Jews went on to become the Rothschild of the East. Today, when you go to Bombay, the Bombay University Library, the docks, the Bombay docks are called Sassoon docks. There is the 150-year-old Knesset Eliyahu Synagogue. We had a Jewish club. We have 2 Jewish schools in Bombay, 1 Jewish school and girls' school in Calcutta of the Baghdadi community. They prospered in India, and then they went on east looking for more business opportunities. So there is a Baghdadi Jewish synagogue of Baghdadi Jews who came from Bombay and Calcutta, in Rangoon, in Shanghai, in Hong Kong, and in Singapore. And if you will see the architecture of those synagogues, it is not Ashkenazi, it is Sephardic architecture, Middle Eastern architecture. So those were built by these wealthy Baghdadi Jews that went further east to expand their trading empire. Today, India is home to about 4,500 Jews, mostly Bnei Israel, a few Kochini, a few Baghdadi Jews, and another 5,000 to 6,000 Bnei Menashe Jews in the northeast. But because of geographical distance, they are physically distanced from us. We do not have contact with them because they are very far in remote India. They migrate directly to Israel. Israel is home to 90,000 Jews of Indian origin. Now, we do not make much noise. We are not aggressive. We have a mindset of being that we are loved in Israel because we do what we are told. Now, Israeli society, you have to push your way through any young, and that's not only Israel, any young nation. America, Israel, these are young nations. We come from ancient cultures where respect and obedience is highly valued. So we have been loved in Israel. We are successful. I would like to see more success. I would like to see the success in Israel for Ethiopian and Indian and other Sephardic brothers and sisters, the same success that Indian Americans have in the United States. When 4 million Indians here are the new Jews of America, they come with nothing, and in science and medicine and Capitol Hill and in academia. They have, after Jews, Indians are the second largest ethnic population at UPenn, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, University of Chicago. So I would like to see that replication in Israel, where young Ethiopians and young Sephardic Jews and Indians and others get the same opportunity. Of course, it's both. It's some part of the government's job, but it's also a lot of it is the community's responsibility to go. So we love Israel. If you ask a second generation, if you ask my generation, those who were born in India, we say India is motherland, Israel is fatherland, because we never experienced anti-Semitism. But if you ask my nephews and nieces who were born in Israel, like you ask Sigal, they say, I'm Israeli. I was born here. I look Indian or I look Ethiopian, but I am born here. This is the country I know. So for me, this is the only land that I know. And this is my motherland and fatherland. That's the difference in the intergenerational difference. If you want, I can show you, if there is time on my schedule, I can show quick. I would like you folks to see a little bit, the Selichot, when you have in high holidays, a little Indian tune of Selichot, a little celebration of Simchat Torah. And so if I can just, Sigal, if you can help me there.
שמחת תורה או...
Simchat Torah, we can start
או
with
סליחות?
Salichot first.
אוקיי.
So this one,
Blessing Hashem,
this is
through song, has
320. I have to go to 320. So this is a Bnei Israel synagogue, 320. 320 in Israel, and so this is, yes. This is the Neila. And you can see the older generation still has the sari. This is all Israelis. But the older generation wear formal clothes. The younger generation are more informal. And then you can do. And these are artifacts from India. The Bima, the Sefer Torah, many of them brought from India to Israel. And you can do Simcha. What is that? These are Indian Jews in Israel, Bnei Israel. The Bnei Israel synagogue. It's a Neila service. Just wanted to show you the tune. This is Yom Kippur service, Neila time. Okay, and then we can do. And then now I will show you Simchat Torah celebration in India. This synagogue was in Beersheba, somewhere in southern Israel. I do not know the exact location, but we have about 200 synagogues of Indian origin in different parts of Israel where communities are concentrated. So this is a Simchat Torah celebration in Mumbai. You see the Bima in the middle, and it's not, we are a traditional community, so men and women do not dance together, but one side it's men, one side it's women on the same level. There is no mechitza, there is no. Okay, and then there is a.
I didn't open the last one.
Thank you. So this was just a little taste of Indian Jewish culture, and I apologize. I've been called from my workplace and all this. I could not bring food, but in the next occasion when you folks get together, I will sponsor Indian dinner for us. So I apologize for that. But I've also looked. So and I'll quickly give you a brief of the political ties. India was not friendly to Israel. It was one of the 13 countries that voted no for the creation of State of Israel in 1947 at the UN vote. 33 voted yes, 10 abstained. And then because of India led the non-aligned movement, it was good to Jews, but it was not good with Israel. And we lost 40 years, and India was seen closer to Soviet Union. Israel was an American ally. But since 92, we have worked overtime to make up for the last 40 years. And today, on the 30th anniversary of India-Israel relations, Israel's relations with India are the second most important bilateral relations that it has after its relations with the United States. $2 billion in defense trade. India is Israel's biggest buyer. So the defense industry is Israel's biggest employer. India is Israel's biggest defense equipment buyer. So 50% goes to India, the remaining goes to the rest of the world. Civilian trade is $6 billion a year. And young Israelis like Sigal, she has been to India. 60,000 Israelis come to India every year, the most popular destination. India number 1, Thailand number 2, Latin America number 3. So India's popularity, it's safe for Jews except for the attack in Mumbai by Pakistani terrorists on Chabad. Besides pickpockets or something, Jews are very welcome. Sigal has seen restaurant signs in Indian villages in Hebrew because so many Israeli tourists are visiting. And the general warmth that we have felt as Jews, as Israelis in India, and what we feel here in the United States, in the Indian American community, is something that I cannot describe. And I think that going forward, in whether it is Israel advocacy or fighting anti-Semitism, the Indian American diaspora is and will be a very strong partner. We are 4 million Indian Americans. Another 4 million of us are in the pipeline, H-1B, work visas, green cards, student visas. So we are growing at a rapid pace, and I think this community will be a very strong ally of Israel and the Jewish community here in the United States. So David and Alan, thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to questions. I'll have to just get off for some time, but thank you very much.
Nassim,
Yes.
can I ask you a couple of questions
Yes.
right now?
Yes, yes.
You said something about the service being traditional.
You take this mic. Here. Keep it there, Michael. They can hear us.
You said something about the service being traditional. Do the Indian Jews fit into one of the categories of Jews in America, for instance, Orthodox or conservative?
Good question.
Or
Then let me give you a very simple, lucid answer. It is, we used to go, of course, now India has American-style supermarkets and all that, but we used to go to a grocery store and you say, I want 10 kilos of rice, 5 kilos of lentils, and what you needed, you got. Same, it goes with Judaism. India, we have 6-day work week. So we have to work 5 days, full days, and half day or full day on Saturday. So we'd go to service in the morning, then we'd go to work, my maternal grandfather, then go to the government work, and then come back in the afternoon or come back in the evening, attend service, and then go home. So we had no choice of being in it. But India was so warm to Jews that the Mumbai bus service, before 80 years, had on Mumbai trams, they had a prepaid pass. So on a Shabbat, the conductor would not ask a Jew to pay money. All you had to do is, show the pass, and he would clip the pass. So no transaction of money. And we had Hebrew as a foreign language along with Farsi and French in Mumbai University. It was taught in Mumbai University. So we don't fit into but we are somewhere between Orthodox and conservative. But we call ourselves traditional because we keep kosher. And India is mostly a vegetarian country, so we don't have food problems. It's mostly 100% vegetarian. So, yeah.
what's the Indian Jewish community like in the United States?
Very small. So we are about 800 Jews here. We have about 2,000 Jews, Indian Jews, who came to Canada because they wanted to give their children English education. So Israel, many of us were sent to the development towns. So I speak English, as you can understand, is because I was raised in India. My cousins in Israel, their English is not so strong because their parents were sent to development towns and the Hebrew was a language of instruction. So some parents made an attempt to come to Australia or to Canada, not for money, but just to continue the centuries-long tradition of we speak with our mother in local language, with our father in English. So remember, the British used to use Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians as the go-betweens. So in the army, in the government service, we had good positions because we were not a threat to the British Empire. And the Hindus and the Muslims were the majority. So in order to help the British would use minorities like us to help them administer the country.
Nassim, talk a little bit about your Jewish year. How is your Jewish year different, if it is different, from the Jewish year that your parents observed when they lived in India? I'll tell you, my Jewish year as an Ashkenazi Jew is highlighted by Passover at one end and the high holidays at the other end. But there are some minor holidays around the calendar. So give us a little idea about Melita, for instance, and also just generally about what your Jewish year is like.
So America has so much choice. We are fortunate to have so much choice in this wonderful nation. And we go to, I was a student, and when we were newly married, I couldn't afford a synagogue membership, so we would go to the Georgetown University Hillel for services. It's open to all, very warm and welcoming. Now we live in Germantown, so we go to Chabad. We used to go to a conservative synagogue also. So because of our Indian background, we are able to float between different sects of Judaism in the United States because we are very comfortable in all. So we observe all festivals. Passover is strict at home, no roti, the Indian flatbread, no, we have to have matzah and all that. We have Shabbat service. We don't light the lamp on time because my wife and I work, but we every Shabbat service, and we have Shabbat dinner. We have Passover. The Malida ceremony is unique. So as Ethiopians have Sigd, and the Moroccans have Memuna. So recently the government of Israel recognized Malida. It's a ceremony where, as Sephardic Jews revere Prophet Shimon Bar Yochai, we revere Prophet Elijah. We don't worship him, but we revere. So any good occasion, we are making aliyah or we are starting a new job, we have a Marida ceremony where we invoke the blessings of Prophet Elijah, and the food is wet parched rice that is wet, moistened with sugar syrup, and 5 fruits. And we have prayers invoking the blessings of Prophet Elijah. That is the Marida ceremony. It was recognized as one of Israel's festivals, along with Sigd and along with Memuna.
Does Melita refer to the ceremony or the holiday itself or the food that's served?
It is food, and it is for any auspicious occasion. You bought a new house, you can have Melita, and then you enter the new house. So you have a new job, or you have a new, something like what Memuna is, right? It's not in the Bible. It's more of a community celebration. It's a tradition. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier a relationship to Sephardic Jews. Do you think of yourself as a Sephardic Jew?
I became an American citizen 1 year ago. So before I say I'm an Indian Jew, now I say I'm a proud Indian American Jew, because it is this country. I used to tell my father, it was very hard to try to put roots here, and I used to tell my father, I want to come home. And he said, late father in heaven, he used to say, son, you come home, you will go into a tailspin, because what you are used to in Washington, and the Indian Prime Minister meets you and the Israelis call you, is because of where you are located. So it is this country that has gave us, when my father would say, it was not New Delhi or Jerusalem, it is Washington, D.C. that gave you the opportunity. So I am very grateful for this wonderful nation.
There's a growing category of Jews in the United States that call themselves Jews of color. Do you think of yourself as a Jew of color? It's a controversial term, I think.
The chairman, Gregory Meeks, the chairman of Foreign Relations Committee, he calls me my Mocha Jewish brother. Now, Mocha means coffee colored. So I think that it is a big advantage, because if I can use my color, my background, my food to serve Israel and the Jewish people, it is a tremendous honor. So what doors, sometimes at workplace, it makes, I raise eyebrows because I have access to lawmakers, but it is through my Indian heritage. It's through the India and Indian American caucus that I have my access, whether it is White House, State Department, the US Congress. So definitely, I am very proud to use my heritage, my food, and my color in service of the Jewish people, Israel, America, and India.
Nassim, you're going to have to leave us for a moment to take an important telephone call from work in a little while. Will you be able to come back?
Yeah, I'm just go down and come back and remove this. But Madam had a question. Quickly, I can answer that.
I do, if I may.
Of course.
I believe I took a class from you a few years ago in Jews from India at the Jewish Studies Center.
Yes.
Is that correct? So there are 2 impressions I have, and I'd like to check on them with you. One is that I think of Hebrew as the language of Judaism, and I believe it was Amharic that was your original language of Judaism in India. So if you could talk about that and some of your ancient prayers, what language it is. And the second thing, I believe you, can you understand me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. One was one question that I had was concerning the ancient language of Judaism that preceded Hebrew. And I think it was Amharic, but I think I'm saying it wrong.
Sure.
So I wanted to ask you about that. And the other thing I remember learning, I believe, is that you were a vegetarian.
Yes.
And that your community of Jews in India was vegetarian.
Vegetarian
so if you
and
could
kosher.
comment on that, on
Sure.
the ancient language
Sure.
and your food traditions, I would appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. So what we have is, we speak, so the Cochin Jews come from southwest India. They speak Malayalam, the language of Kerala. We come from the state of Mumbai, Bombay, so we speak Marathi. And the Baghdadi Jews spoke Hindustani. It's a mix of Hindi and Arabic because of where they came from. So, but we did our prayers in Hebrew. So there was, even in today books in Israel, prayer books in Israel, one side in Marathi, one side in Hebrew. The Cochin Jews now, it's all Hebrew. So that's our language. But if, as ancient texts go, that Thomas the Apostle, when the lots were selected, and he picked, his lot came to go to India, he landed in Goa and in Kerala, in India, and when he landed, because he knew there are Jews there, he landed and he spoke in Aramaic, and the local Jews spoke back to him in Aramaic. That much ancient the Jewish community is in India. And of course, we kept our traditions, we didn't convert, but that is the, when you ask about the ancient language, that is the context of India.
And you have some prayers in that language.
Yeah, but we pray in Hebrew, and so we have, now in Israel, most of my relatives, all Hebrew is like, with Sigal also, I speak. All my younger nephews and nieces, we speak Hebrew. They can understand Hindi from the movies, Bollywood movies a bit, but they do not, there's no communication. So, and in English. But if I can, I asked about Jews of color. I think it is high time that the state of Israel trains and sends more Jews of color as diplomats. Because all the time they say Israel is an apartheid country, because they see white, but Israel is 55% of 60% of Israel is colored Jews. If you send more diplomats and public officials who are colored, it will change the perception of what Israel is. And the Israel we know is a multicultural society, but in Western media it is portrayed in a different way. So I think that would help. But I'll be back.
Thank you, Nassim. Nassim has to take an important office telephone call, but he'll be back on the panel to answer your further questions.
Great.
Council
Keep the
member.
conversation going. Sigal, you're next, I believe. Okay, so let's give a warm welcome to Sigal Sandaka. Sigal's parents were born and raised in Ethiopia, and they are part of Beta Israel, a group who traces their origin to the time of King Solomon. In Ethiopia, Sigal's father suffered persecution for his Zionist activities. In 1984, along with thousands of other Ethiopian Jews, Sigal's parents fled Ethiopia on foot through the desert to Sudan, a trek in which some did not survive. Later that year, many of you know Operation Moses, which in over 7 weeks and in secret, Israel flew 8,000 Ethiopian Jews from Sudan to Israel. Sigal's parents were among that group and brought their traditions and observances. And actually, Nassim mentioned the holiday Sig. They settled in Haifa, where Sigal was born and raised. She went on to earn her bachelor's degree in government diplomacy and strategy from Reichman University. And Sigal now serves as a Jewish Agency Israel Fellow at George Washington University, Hillel. So Sigal, welcome, and we look forward to you sharing a bit of your Jewish experience.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Is introduced very nicely. I'm Sigal Sandaka. I'm Israeli. My parents from Ethiopia, so I'm like Israeli Ethiopian, or it's me. Okay. I'm an Israeli Ethiopian or a Jew from Ethiopia. It's so interesting that we are very similar, me and Nassim, but like there's a lot of differences too, but we can talk about it later. So I'm 28, soon to be. I'm the Jewish Agency Israel Fellow with GW Hillel. I'm here already 9 months. I'm gonna stay here between 1 year to 3. It means that I'm responsible for all the Israel programming at GW, trips to Israel, supervising my students and their process with Israel. A lot of like the view on Israel for students, like it changed a lot when they get to college, and I'm there to help them build their emotions and space about Israel. So yeah, let's talk about Ethiopian Jews first. As said, my parents came to Israel at 1984. My father actually is a prisoner of Zion. It means that he helped a lot of Jews to get to a gathering point in Sudan, in Ethiopia, and they walked all the way to Sudan. It was because the government in Ethiopia didn't allow Ethiopian Jews to get out of the country, so they needed to do it secretly. So Ethiopian activists and the Israel government and the IDF worked together to do this aliyah. They walk by night, only nights. They hide it at the days and worked by night all the way from Gondar, Ethiopia, to Sudan. And after several days, my dad got caught by the Sudan police, and he was in jail for 9 months for what he done, because it was outside of the law. They torture him and did a lot of things that we don't talk about at home. After 9 months, they released him, and he met my mom again, and they made a way to Israel. Ethiopian Jews, their story are very, very similar. A lot of people say that in this day, that's the most similar story for Bnei Israel and their Yetziat Mitzrayim, like the Exodus from Egypt, because they walked and got to Israel. So people they compare it a lot. There's a lot of narratives of how Ethiopian Jews got to Ethiopia. One of them is King Solomon and Queen Sheba and the relationship between them, and we are the descendants of them. Other narrative is that after the destruction of the first temple, we were sent to Ethiopia. That's why, by the way, Ethiopians don't have Torah Sheba'al Peh. Like, we don't celebrate a lot of Jewish holidays because we knew only the Torah Shebechtav. We did only things that we know from the Bible. So in Ethiopia, I'm saying we, but I was born in Israel. So in Ethiopia, they used to eat like chicken with milk, for example, because it's halacha thing to don't eat meat with milk. But chicken, like in the Torah, it said don't eat gdi b'chalav imo, like I don't know how to say it in English, but I hope you understand what I say. So it's very, very, very Zionist community. Everything I was taught about my religion and my roots is that everything they wanted ever is to get to Zion, to get to the land of Israel, to Eretz Zavat Chalav U'Dvash, to the golden Jerusalem. That's what they thought. They really believed that the Jerusalem made of gold. If you will search in Google, if you will write Operation Moses, Operation Solomon, you will see when they get down of the airplanes, they're all kissing the floor. It's like the most, when I was a kid, all my wishes was like, oh, I want an iPhone. Oh, I want this and that. For them, it was like getting to this land, to where our people are. Like, for them, even white Jews, it was a surprise. They thought all the Jews are black. So it's very, very interesting because we are the farthest community, didn't have connections to other communities, and that shape us a lot. Even how people treat us. we were called falasha, strangers. No one liked us in Ethiopia. Ethiopia never colonized, never ever. It's a very Christian country. So you can see sometimes, if you go to Israel, you can see like Ethiopian moms, they have crosses on their head or like neck. Sometimes it's because they had to and people forced them, but sometimes they needed to hide their Judaism. So, and that's how a lot of Christian practice Christianity in Ethiopia. So yeah, there's two big operations that brought us, that we and the Israel government did together to bring the Ethiopian community to Israel. It's Operation Moses, that was in 1984, that my father is part of it, and Operation Solomon, which was in 1991. We are 2% of the Israel population, which is very little, but because of it, we are very, very united. Very, like the Ethiopian community, we always laugh that we all know each other. Like we are all cousins because we are very small, very humble, very nice people, very like, as he said, in the Israel community, in the Israel society, you need to find your place. You need to like man up sometimes to like find your voice, your own voice as a community and as individuals. And for us, it took a lot of time. We are still there. We're still in the process. But yeah, like the community, my mom is a cleaner. Most of the community works in this kind, like our parents work in this kind of things. I studied in the Hebrew Reality School. It's a very, very good school in Haifa because I was in a program that entered Ethiopian Jews to school because they wanted to make us more, like to close the gap between Ethiopian to other communities. And you know, always like the last aliyah in Israel is the aliyah that get the most struggles. They did, like we do it to everyone. That's Israel. Like we did to Moroccan, we did to Ethiopian, we did to the Russian, we did to Yemen. Everyone suffer when they get it. That's like our warm welcoming to Israel. That's how we do it. But I think it taught us how to be and react and like experience the Israel society. So as I said, my mom is a cleaner. I grew up with a cleaner mom for a lot of years. If we are talking about how I felt as like first generation, I'm like Tzabarit. I was born in Israel. I'm Israeli, but I'm Ethiopian. I'm Israeli, but I'm black. So it's hard because like in home, I'm practicing culture in one way. Outside of home, people see me the other way. I'm getting into a room, I'm black, but here, like how in America they see me, it's very interesting. But like a lot of time I was very ashamed because she's a cleaner and she looked like Ola and like this old clothes and like don't dress like other not Ethiopian people. But today, like for sure she is my superhero. She is like my legend. She is everything that I am today and I will ever be. And she always taught me that the Ethiopian community really believe in like, you should know where you came from to know where you do want to go. Like, know your roots, know who you are, be proud of being Jewish, be proud of being Ethiopian. It's part of your story, it's part of your journey in life. Yeah, I think Israel is very interesting because we are Jews from everywhere. Like Nassim said, there's Jews from Ethiopia, Jews from Morocco, Jews from Yemen, Jews from, and if we'll talk about Jews of color, I don't see myself as a Jew of color. Like I don't see myself as an other group inside of Jewish community. I'm a Jew from Ethiopia. Like there's a Jew from Morocco and Jew from Poland and Jew from Mexico. Like I'm first a Jew and then I'm the foreign country that I even didn't born there. Like I was born in Israel. So I don't see myself as a Jew of color. I always correct my students if we have a lot of discussions about it or like panels. So I will say I'm a Jew from Ethiopia. I'm not a Jew of color. My color is, it's part of who I am, but like I'm first a Jew before I'm Ethiopian. My mom will say the same. Ethiopia it's like a train station. We were there for a period of time, but like we always went with the face to Zion, to Israel. That's our homeland, that's your home. I gave birth, not me, my mom gave birth to her kids in Israel. I'm not gonna be a cleaner as, she always said, you're not gonna be cleaner as me. Like, I did I can die right now. I did everything that I wanted ever. I got to the land of Zion. I gave birth. My kid studied in Israel. I have an Israeli diplomacy. For her, she came from a village. She was cooking on like fire on the land. Like, for her, it's everything. So, holiday, we have Chag HaSigd, which is 50 days after Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur. We believe as a community that we need to do a self-reflection, a community self-reflection. After in Yom Kippur we do personal, individual self-reflection. We should do one as a community too, which I think it's amazing. In Ethiopia, how they practice it, they went to the highest mountain with rocks. They climb the mountain until they get to the highest point, and then they throw in the rocks, going down, celebrate the day and the fact that we left our sins or our bad things that we do as a community too, and not just as individuals. How we do it in Israel is that everyone go to Jerusalem. It's a huge day. A lot of our rabbis that call Kesim in Amharic, they pray. The kids see each other. It's a very, very happy day. For them, they are fasting. We are celebrating. But it's an amazing day. We do it in GW. I'm inviting you to come next year, 50 days after Yom Kippur, remember. I celebrated with my students now. And we have Memorial Day for the people who died in the way to Sudan. What else? Now I'm shlicha in GW. I think I'm closing a circle with my father because he did his shlichut as a prisoner of Zion, and now I'm representing my family and my community here in DC. I'm bringing my story and help other young Jewish students to find their way with the Israel connection and to find their connection to their roots as Jewish. It's not even it's matter, but it's not matter where you are, where you're from. We are all Jews in the end of the day. Jew from Ethiopia, Jews of color, we are all Jews. We grew up in the same values. And I think that's what I like in my job, and that's what I like to talk and to experience with my students. I'll be happy to hear questions.
So thank you, Sigal. I think what we're going to do is introduce Elliot, have him share his Jewish experience, and then we'll open it up for questions for both of you, and perhaps Nassim will be able to rejoin us at that point. So let's introduce our third speaker, Elliot Tota. So Elliot shared with me that he grew up in this area, and I think is a native of Cheverly, Maryland. But Elliot's father was born in Damascus, Syria, and then in his youth grew up in Beirut, or moved to Beirut later on in his life, where he met Elliot's mother, who was born and raised in Lebanon. After his parents moved and emigrated to the United States, Elliot was born, as we said, in Cheverly and raised in Rockville. He attended Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School, where he started the Sephardic Student Minyan that remains active to this day. He then attended the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, from which he graduated magna cum laude. So good job there, Elliot. In his professional life, Elliot leads the Oxbridge Group, a real estate development company, where he manages a diverse array of residential, commercial, and industrial projects. Before Oxbridge, Elliot developed and launched consumer products for parents. Since last November, he has served as president of Rockville's Magen David Beit Eliyahu Sephardic Congregation, a modern Orthodox synagogue whose members are mostly of Mediterranean Sephardic descent. So Elliot, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing a little bit about your Jewish experience.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Well, it had everything in there except for my GPA. It's so nice to stand before all of you here today, along with these amazing co-panelists. As was mentioned, I am the American of the bunch, which Sigal still refuses to believe. But I'm first generation here, born and raised. I grew up in Rockville, Maryland, where I attended Magen David from, I think, since I was 5 or so, really as long as I can remember. And I was recently elected president of the congregation. So this is Magen David, one of our younger congregants jokes that when it was time for his bar mitzvah, his father explained to people, just keep on driving down Wood Glen Drive until you see the building that looks like a mosque with a big sign in front of it that says, "We stand with Israel." So this is our congregation. We're home to about 100, anywhere from 100 to 200 families, depending on who got into an argument with who the week prior. But we have been around since 1966. We started as a small minyan. And then grew in the 80s into our first building, and then into this building in 1998. We are the only Sephardic synagogue in or around the nation's capital. There are the other minyanim, other minyans, other areas, or maybe within different synagogues that a small group will meet, but we're the actually only Sephardic synagogue. This is the inside of the sanctuary. It's awesome not to have to raise my voice tremendously now. I got amplification. Normally on Shabbat, I'm giving the announcements and speaking to everybody without any amplification. As you can see, it's a large sanctuary. We would love to have you come out and visit. I think you'll find it to be a very unique and different service, and I'll get into that. And Sigal, one more for me. And just this is a picture from inside our Hechal. As you can see, the Torah scrolls are very different, of a unique nature compared to most Ashkenazi synagogues that I've been to. And again, it just begins to speak to the Sephardic flavor. So, speaking about Sfaradim, I've been asked to sort of represent Sfaradim. Which is a very, very broad group of people. It's sort of speaking about North Americans. Within North America, you have different languages, you have different cultures. Even within people who speak the same language, you have different subcultures. So Sfaradim is a very, very broad group of people. And so I thought it would actually be helpful to put the entire discussion in context. I can talk to you about some customs, I can talk to you about some unique traditions, but I thought it would actually make sense to take a step back and to really briefly go through a little bit of Jewish history to sort of say, okay, who are the Sfaradim? Where did we come from? So we just celebrated Passover. We all left Egypt. Job well done, everybody. And we made our way to Canaan, Canaan, and that ultimately became the Kingdom of Judea. Now, from those of you who recall your Jewish history, built the temples began to come down, and we began to go into exile. And that's really the beginning of the story of the Jewish diaspora and with the different directions that Jewish diaspora went. You always had Jews looking to come back, even until recently, as Sigal spoke to, as Nassim spoke to, wanting to come back to the land of Israel. But the story of Jews is really between 2,000 plus years ago in 1948 was really a story of two things. It was pursuing economic opportunity and avoiding persecution. And that really drove Jews throughout history, those two concepts. So once the Jews were exiled, you're talking about the times of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was great in terms of economic opportunity, and there was no persecution. Jews thrived in the Roman Empire until they adopted Christianity. And again, one of the themes you're going to see consistently is, how did Jews do under Christianity? How did Jews do under Islam? It had all the impact. It was the difference maker. So once the Roman Empire adopted Christianity, things started to get a lot worse for the Jews. And they started to get persecuted more, and they started having to move in other directions. After the Roman Empire, all of a sudden you began to see Islam. And I'm sort of moving through time here rather quickly, but Islam is what came next. And contrary to what you would think of today watching the news, in terms of terrorist attacks and conflict and Palestine and Israel and whatnot, Islam was spectacular for Jews as compared to Christianity. When in Islam there's the concept of the jimmis or the zimmis, depending on your pronunciation. But basically Islam looks at non-Muslims in two ways. You're either a people of the book, so you're Christian or Jewish, or you're a pagan, Zoroastrian or whatever else. If you're a people of the book, you're okay. You're not a Muslim, but you're okay. And that allowed Jews in Muslim lands to thrive significantly more than they did otherwise. So again, sort of coming back to history, once you had the rise of Islam centuries after the Roman Empire, all of a sudden they actually, and as Nissim spoke to in terms of the Indian community and how the Jews were sort of a go-between, all of a sudden the Jews became very useful to the Muslims as they were growing in power, as they were conquering more lands, because they were the jimmis, they were this acceptable group of people, and they could be relied on. They were not Christian. They could be relied on to sort of help provide the infrastructure and help build this Muslim empire that was beginning to develop. So Jews, particularly in Spain, around the Middle Ages, had what was called the Golden Age of Jewry in Spain. There were a tremendous number of Jews living in Spain. And again, there were already Jews peppered throughout the Middle East, but all of a sudden Spain became a hub for Jews in terms of developing their own religion. They were allowed to practice their own religion. They didn't have to hide it. There were certain rules. They had to pay a tax, what's called a jizya, just as, again, people of the book had to. It made them second class, not third class citizens. So there were elements of their life that were not the same. They were not the same as Muslims, but they were allowed to practice their religion. They didn't have to hide it. They were allowed to participate fully in society, et cetera, et cetera. And this created the golden age of Jewry in Spain in the Middle Ages, from which, we're talking about Maimonides, we're talking about a lot of the great rabbis in terms of the commentary, development of Jewish philosophy, and again, a real fusion of not only Jewish thought, but with science, with philosophy. Again, it wasn't Judaism in a bubble, it was really a Judaism that was integrated into society, into daily life, into their ability to really integrate all of that together. And so a couple hundred years later, again, as Spain became more Christian, and we ultimately headed into the Inquisition and ultimately the expulsion, it was that expulsion of the Jews, it was that expulsion of the Jews from Spain, where there was this hub that then really resulted in this massive dispersion of Jews throughout, some to Europe, but by and large to the Ottoman Empire. Why to the Ottoman Empire? Because it was a lot better to be Jewish in a Muslim land than it was in a Christian land. In a Christian land, it was very black and white. You're either Christian or you're not Christian. And if you're Christian, great. If you're not, sorry. It's not going to be an easy time for you. There were shades of gray in the Ottoman Empire, in the Muslim lands. And again, Jews saw that they thrived in those shades of gray. So the term Sephardic, Sfarad in Hebrew is Spain. Sephardic means a Spanish Jew. But the fact of the matter is, again, there were Jews already in the Middle East. A tremendous exodus from Spain into Europe, into the Middle East, into Northern Africa. And so with time, Sephardic has come to represent all Jews that have a legacy in the Middle East, regardless of whether they had one prior or whether they somehow ultimately emanated from that exodus. And so if you actually get into it, there are a couple more categories, if you will. There's Oriental Jews or Mizrahi Jews, Jews from the East. And again, that's more of, let's say, that Middle Eastern. Then you have the Sephardi Jews who, again, would speak the Ladino and really can trace their roots back to Spain. But all of that has sort of been lumped together into Sephardic Jews. And in fact, our congregation, Magen David, I mean, you have, again, entirely tracing Northern Africa all the way around the Mediterranean into Turkey, Greece, etc. We're all represented there. It's really a mixing bowl of a lot of different cultures, of a lot of different sets of traditions, but they're a lot closer to each other, having developed, again, generally in lands of Muslim rule than any of the Ashkenazi customs and traditions, which just developed in a completely different trajectory based on where they developed. And so if you continue to trace this forward, the Jews were very happy living in the Muslim lands until the Zionistic movement started. That's when things completely changed. So my father was born in Syria, My father was born in Syria in 1950, just after the founding of the State of Israel. When the State of Israel was founded, everything changed for Jews in the Middle East. He was born in 1945, just before the founding of the State of Israel. In 1950, after the founding of the State of Israel, they actually had to escape Syria. It was no longer a matter of, okay, well then leave. It was a matter of, you're not allowed to leave. You're now sort of being held prisoner. And so my father was drugged. He was 5 years old. He was drugged to fall asleep. My grandmother dressed up in a full jalabiya as an Arab woman, and they drove across the border to Lebanon, and my grandfather and his brother walked across the border to avoid detection. And so they ended up in Lebanon. My mother is actually Armenian and converted to Judaism later on. She's the first generation of sole survivors of the Armenian genocide, which is a whole different topic. But they met each other at the American University of Beirut. It's very interesting. My mother's first job at the American University of Beirut was in the library. She would get the newspapers every day, and she would have to go through them with a big black marker and strike out any references to Israel before the newspapers were put on the shelves. And then she went on to marry my father, who was Jewish. Funny the way the world works. But so they were together at the American University of Beirut. But this was also around the time of the '67 war. And things just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, during that war, my father was a TA at American University of Beirut. And at a certain point, there was some rioting, there were some demonstrations from the students, very upset about the war and Israel, apparently doing well in that war, and they all sort of cried out, let's go get, my father's name was Sammy Toda, let's go get Sammy, let's go get the Jew. And he was in his faculty building then. He had to run up to the roof as they stormed the building. Just at that time, it was either a siren or there was some big development, an announcement, and all of a sudden everybody filed out to try to go find out what was going on. And so he ran back to his car, his tires were slashed, and he hopped on a bus and got back home. so shortly thereafter, my parents ended up coming to Washington, D.C., where they had my 3 sisters and I. And so, again, sort of coming back to the historical perspective, that was the personal interlude, but coming back to the historical perspective, Jews were doing not amazingly, but doing pretty darn good in terms of living in Muslim lands. And then the state of Israel changed that entirely for them, and they were no longer really thriving anymore at all. They really did become prisoners in those lands. And even when my father's family left Lebanon, as things got worse, again, my father and my mother came to the States. My father's family had to again escape Lebanon. They had to leave in the middle of the night. They had to leave all their possessions behind. They couldn't take anything with them. It was the second time that my grandfather, in a span of approximately 20 years, had to pick up in the middle of the night, leave everything behind, and go start anew. Which, I mean, we have it so great. Because can you imagine doing that, having to do that twice with your family, with children, et cetera, et cetera. And what, interestingly, again, anecdotally, although it's very significant, you have now very large, today, Sephardic communities in Mexico, in Brazil, and in all sorts of Latin America, all different parts of Latin America. And the reason is, and this amazed me when I learned this a couple of years ago, speaking to my aunts in Israel, is because these Jews that were in the Arab lands, they looked down on going to Israel, which is a big difference, having heard Sigal's story. Israel was the land, again, economic opportunity I spoke to, right, as being a primary motivator. Israel was a land of a lot of sand and a lot of immigrants and not a lot of established commerce, so why would we want to go to Israel? So you actually had a lot of Jews from the Arab lands look to go to Mexico, look to go to Brazil, look to go to these, budding, developing countries where there was going to be all this opportunity, as opposed to going to Israel. So that's extremely interesting in terms of divergences of how different people viewed the opportunity and where they chose to end up. And then lastly, sort of tracing all this back, the state of Israel was a game changer in terms of the Jews from Arab lands. It was also a game changer. It's also a game changer if you look to where we stand today, 70 some years later, because Judaism has developed in silos. It really has over time. Smaller silos, India, Ethiopia, larger silos, Morocco, Syria. Even, within Syria, it was siloed because you had the Aleppo community, you had the Damascus community, then there was, the Lebanese community, and then Egypt had a very, very small community until the Suez Canal was built, where all of a sudden there was a tremendous amount of economic opportunity, and all sorts of people from all different areas came to Egypt. And so you had Egyptian Judaism sort of develop in its own silo, and Moroccan, and Tunisian, and all these different things. That's how Judaism has developed for thousands of years. And for the first time since really the kingdom of Judea, we stand at a crossroads in terms of Judaism, where through a combination of the state of Israel and technology, which unites us all of a sudden you have this massive consolidation. You have this massive consolidation whereby Israel has become this melting pot, and among the religious at the very least, there's almost a competition. Well, okay, you do this, but I do this. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, I'll do that. And all of a sudden you have the unique elements of a lot of these cultures disappearing as things become homogeneous increasingly. Which is, in my opinion, a little bit sad. It's wonderful that we have a refuge. It's wonderful that Israel is what it is. I love Israel with all my heart. I'm married to a beautiful Israeli woman who I love dearly. She's blonde hair with blue eyes. I have a blonde hair, blue-eyed son. Imagine that. I walk around with him. I look like a nanny. But it's a very unique element in terms of, if you look at our history, we really do stand at this amazingly unique point in history where Judaism is changing materially. And a lot of these unique spices are getting washed away a little bit. I do want to speak to a couple things now that we sort of put it in context. I do want to speak to a couple things about Sephardic Judaism that are different from what is the overall genre that is Ashkenazic Judaism. So again, we didn't have to hide our Judaism. We weren't in ghettos. We didn't have to develop Jewish institutions defensively nearly as much as Ashkenazi Jews. So we're a lot more flamboyant in our Judaism. We sing a lot more. If you come to our services, there's a lot more singing. There's a lot more color. Arguing. Oh, woo. A lot more arguing, a lot more drama. But yeah, color in every sense, both in terms of the physical sense and the way people dress, to the style of services. A lot more is done out loud, again, vocally, very ornate in terms of the tunes, a lot of Middle Eastern influence in terms of the tunes. There's a funny story of a World War II American Jewish soldier who was in China, and he found out that there were Chinese Jews, and he goes to the service, and all these Chinese Jews looking fully Chinese are praying, and they're doing so clearly in an accent, but in Hebrew and whatnot. And after the service is over, he approaches one of them and he says, I can't believe this. I'm sitting here in China, and you guys are praying, and this is amazing, and I'm Jewish too. And the Chinese guy gave him a questioning look, and he sort of said, and excuse my very poor attempt at a Chinese accent, but he said, funny, you no look Jewish. And I think that there would be some element of that when you were to come and see a true Sephardic service, because it's a completely different style, it's a completely different flavor. You asked Nassim, does Indian Judaism fit into Orthodox or conservative or Reform or whatever, or Reconstruction or whatever else it may be? Sephardic Judaism, there's only one real style, and I would say it's a more modern, open Orthodox style. But you don't go in. There's no. Maybe there are now. I don't know of any. But there are no conservative Sephardic synagogues. There are no Reform Sephardic synagogues. Sephardic synagogues, by definition, are modern Orthodox, but very sort of open. And again, we didn't go through the Enlightenment and Reformation that Europe did, which partially what contributed to this stratification of observance levels. But B, because Sephardim were integrated so much more into daily life, the style of Judaism, as Nassim said, they had to work on Saturday, right? The style of Judaism was a lot more. There was a lot more of a Judaism life balance. So at our synagogue, it's a modern Orthodox synagogue, and the kind of the rule is everybody's got to walk the last 20 feet to synagogue. However you get there, otherwise it's up to you, but everybody's walking those last 20 feet in terms of the Orthodox style. There's a broad level of observance, just as broad as the backgrounds of the people. But when we're in there, the men and the women sit separately. It is a tradition, based service, and that's the only way it is. So there's an understanding that sort of everybody does what they do outside of the synagogue, and that's up to them. But when we're in the synagogue, we stick to the tradition, and we respect the tradition, and that's really the way Sephardic Judaism works. Mysticism. Mysticism plays a larger role among Sephardic Jews. On what extreme, you'll even still have Sephardic Jews in Israel and whatnot, and I'm not the biggest fan of this personally, but you'll have them writing amulets for people for infertility or health reasons or whatever it is. But you will see many, many Sephardic Jews with the evil eyes, with the chamsas, with all that. My nephews always had an evil eye pinned to them from the moment they were born. I have one in my car. I've always had one in my car. My mom, the first thing she did was put it in my car. It was very funny, again, anecdotally, at the synagogue. We built our new building in 1998. the community, when they were pouring the foundations, came out. They wanted to be part of this auspicious moment. And when they started pouring the concrete for the foundations, everybody starts pulling out evil eyes and khamsas and starts throwing them in to imbue the very foundations of the building with that protection against all that is evil, against all that negativity. And it got to the point where the inspector had to stop the people because they began to undermine the strength of the concrete. They were throwing so many different evil eyes and whatnot in. So there's an element of mysticism that you do have in the Ashkenazic world among Hasidim, but again, because of the development of Ashkenazi Judaism, mysticism was frowned upon a lot more. So we still stay mystic, I guess. Oh, and then there's the food. And again, my wife is 100% of Polish descent. So for her, there's no Passover without knei delach. There's no Passover without matzo ball soup, right? For me, there's no Passover without kusa mahshi or kibbeh hamda. For the Yemenites, they would wake up every Saturday morning to jachnun. For the Moroccans, they have their tagines, they have their dafina, they have their salat quits, and I'm not sure what. So everybody needs to have Sephardic food because it is the best. It is outstanding. And lastly, I was asked to speak to a couple of unique Sephardic customs. Mimuna, at the end of Passover, if you think about it, the beginning of Passover was where we left Egypt. The end of Passover is actually where we got through the Red Sea, and the sea came crashing back down on the Egyptians. So that is the really celebratory moment at the end of Passover when, all of a sudden we were really out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. That was the final moment. And so to celebrate that, it's a Moroccan custom that has now been really adopted in Israel globally. Sort of everybody does it. But Mimuna, where you have all these... So you have all these dough-based pastries, and these donuts are called mufletas, and you sort of celebrate with all these sweets, as if you really, you're celebrating the fact that now we are the Jewish people. Also, there's legend has it, if you will, that when the Red Sea came crashing down on the Egyptian soldiers, that afterwards all of their riches washed up on the shores of the Red Sea. And so there's also the tradition of gold coins at the Mimunas, and it being an auspicious moment to hopefully for the year ahead, to do well economically. So there are all sorts of themes related to that. And so this is Professor Rivlin, again speaking to what I spoke to, Israeli president, celebrating Mimuna. Like I said, it's become this big thing. Everybody dresses up in the Moroccan garb and whatnot. And you'll see it, in Israel, it doesn't matter what background you're in. Sigal can speak, is nodding. Everybody goes and celebrates Mimuna because it's just a great time to be past Pesach and to enjoy a lot of sweets. Okay. There are other ones. Next week at Magen David, we're celebrating our Hilulah, which is the celebration of the passing of a great rabbi. So Shimon Bar Yochai was mentioned by Nassim. So we do a celebration. It's also a fundraiser for the synagogue. We auction off candles, but in memory of the great tzaddikim, in honor of the great rabbis and whatnot. But it's this celebratory event, very Moroccan-oriented, Moroccan-themed, where great food, you learn about the tzaddikim, you usually have the rabbi or whoever's leading it, tell you information about them, et cetera, and so it's another celebratory event. Other random customs, I don't know if you know, but also on Passover, since we're on that theme, do you know that the Persian Jews beat each other with big scallions? All right, everybody's been beaten here apparently by an Iranian scallion at some point or another. And so they do that to remember the whips of the Egyptian taskmasters, as well as they, anecdotally, you're also supposed to get out your aggression for other people in your family during that moment. So this is because you I read an article online that this daughter keeps on, she says, for 15 years I've been getting mad at my mother because one of her meatballs gave me food poisoning or diarrhea, or I'm not sure what it was. And so every year, this is for those meatballs, and this is for I don't know what. And then, so many different customs. I think I've taken enough of your time. Thank you so much.
Elliot, I do have a couple of questions for you. First, it's remarkable that we have two Jewish stories on this panel of a walking exodus, where members of the family actually had to walk to escape persecution. In the 20th century, not thousands of years ago, but recently. Elliot, do you think you might have Spanish ancestry? Because you mentioned that some of the Jews from Spain went to the Middle East.
So my younger sister did a 23andMe, and it came back 82% Middle Eastern, 10% Southern European, 6% Italian, and 2% Ashkenazic. And I joke with my wife that was the 2% that was cut off during my Brit Milah, but I don't know.
But so there's some portion.
But yeah, there's definitely something.
Do you think that the reason that North African Jews went to Latin America instead of Israel had something to do with the language Ladino, that maybe they thought the people in Latin America spoke Spanish and we speak Ladino?
No, we're talking about families who for generations spoke Arabic, not Ladino. Both of my parents spoke Arabic. Arabic was my father's best language. My parents were so busy wanting us to learn Hebrew and Armenian that we never learned Arabic, which I'm still going to get there. But Arabic was absolutely the way they operated. All my aunts, and when my father, who passed away 10 years ago, when they would all get together, it was all in Arabic.
And your father was president of your synagogue before you, wasn't he?
He was when I grew up watching him be president. And so I don't know whether he'd be happy or not that I am, but yeah.
Do you think of yourself as both Sephardic and Mizrahi, or is Mizrahi just a different category?
So again, speaking to the arguments, it's not just Sephardic or Mizrahi, it's Syrian and from where in Syria, and there's so much of flag planting as to exactly what country you're from and what part of that country you're from. I'd like to think of myself as a lot of everything and not one of anything. So I'm definitely Sephardic. I'm definitely Mizrahi, and yeah, there's all sorts of different parts.
Do you think of Mizrahi as a subset of Sephardic, that all Mizrahi Jews are Sephardic?
It's come to be one, just because how many terms can you have for a group of people? But yeah, I would say that it's become a subset of Sephardic.
Sigal, I had a couple of questions for you. Do you know of current Ethiopian synagogues? Are there synagogues where a high percentage of the people are of Ethiopian descent?
In Israel, yeah. In Ethiopia there's some, but in Israel there's a lot. What's funny is that in my neighborhood we didn't have Ethiopian synagogue, so I went to a Sephardi synagogue because my parents are like more Orthodox too, and that's the most similar. So we usually go to the Sephardic synagogues if we don't have Ethiopian, but yeah, there is Ethiopian synagogues.
Did you find that you assimilated pretty well, your family assimilated pretty well into general Israeli culture, or did you suffer any racism there, any persecution?
I think something similar is one of the impacts of immigration is that our parents want us to get very part of the community, so they don't teach you the language. I don't speak Amharic, so it means that I couldn't speak with my grandmother, for example, my whole life, because my mom always said, I want you to be Israeli. I don't want you to be different, which is funny because I'm brown, but okay. But yeah, so I don't talk, like she didn't taught me the language, which means that my kids probably, it's not sure that they would know it. I'm lucky that my parents speak Hebrew, So that is one thing. But I think being black is, the struggle is it's a global struggle. It's not matter if I'm in Israel and I'm a Jewish, or in America, or in Europe. So yeah, you have racism in Israel too. And as I said, every aliyah in Israel have struggles. So it's our turn now. It changes a little, like we are in very slow baby steps, but we try to manage through it. But there used to be a lot of racism, and there's still people who won't like me because I'm black, even though I'm Jew as them. Or when I get in a room, I feel that's the first thing you see. So you have assumption of me, or people who won't sell me apartments, or want my kids to study in the same school. When I was in 6th grade, there was a huge thing that school in Petah Tikva didn't. They made a class for white students and Ethiopian students, and we wrote a letter because I was in a very white school and we were all inclusive. But it's like everywhere, though. I think it's better, like it's part of my life now, like the understanding that black struggle is more globalized and it's all time. But I hope, as you said, which I don't know if it's good or bad, but like in some time, like with the generation in Israel, you don't have anymore the roots that we are so embracing now. Like my grandkids probably will be half Ethiopian, for example. Like you won't gonna see it that hard as you see it now. We're gonna be more involved. But yeah, about what, like Mimuna and everything, I'll say that in Israel, Mimuna, I'm Ethiopian, as you know. Me and all my friends, one is Indian, one is Sephardic, I'm Ethiopian, Ashkenazi. We go together. All the houses in Israel are open, the Moroccan and like the Mizrahi houses, Sephardic, open. We just go from house to house, eat the amazing food that I wish it was the whole year. But yeah.
Is there any sizable Ethiopian Jewish community in the United States, do you know?
I don't know. I think in DC there's 350,000 Ethiopian.
Christians.
Yeah, but Christians. I was very surprised when I got off the plane in my first day 9 months ago. I saw so many Ethiopians or black people. For me, it was the first time I was part of majority, like with my color. I was shocked. Like I never practiced. I never experienced me being part of. I was we're a minority in Israel too, not as a Jew, as a black. And suddenly here, all around black people, not here, but in the airport. So there's a lot of Ethiopian, but Christian, not Jewish Ethiopian. I met some, like 2 people in Independence Day party, but yeah.
What's it like living here so far from where you grew up, so far from where your parents grew up?
I think for my parents, they've never been in another place except of Ethiopia, so they don't even know how to measure or imagine what's America. I've been here in the vacation and stuff, but it's full of surprises. I didn't know Jewish life in America. Like in Israel, we don't know how you need to keep and practice Judaism, how you need to choose every day to be Jewish. For me, it's part of my culture. And suddenly here, I walked to Hillel during Yom Kippur, and I was so surprised. No one knows I'm like fasting, or I'm like having this hard day, or like thinking and everything. And everyone wants to go like to work or listen to music, and for me it was bizarre. It's so hard, and even my student, 19 years old kids, practicing and experiencing Judaism every day, like how it's amazing to see it. They're 19 years old kids. They're supposed to only care about like phones or whatever, but they are practicing in Judaism. Come 3 days in Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays to pray at the Hillel. So I was very surprised by it. Another side of it is being black in America is very different than being black in Israel. There are similarities with racism and struggles, but the history is very different. So sometimes people recognize me as an African American, but I'm not, and I look like, but I'm not. I don't have the same history, but I have the same color, so I get treated as a black woman, or people like see me as something. It's very confusing, but it's very interesting to find my place and my voice inside of all of it, and inside of the Jewish community. The Jewish community here, it's not the same way as the Jewish community in Israel. As Nassim said, it's 60% of the Jews of Israel is Jews, not white Jews, or like. So it's very, very interesting to see here how it's the opposite, and how people are very surprised by me being Israeli and Jewish. So it's a lot of very interesting experience that happens here. I'm learning a lot, a lot. Even the fact that you come here to hear about other Jewish communities, it's so important for me to meet you and for you to meet other Jewish communities and hear about Israel and hear about what's going on outside of your community.
I have so many more questions, but I want to ask the audience here and the audience online if you have questions that you want to ask our panelists. Yes, go ahead. And then in the back.
Are there a lot of synagogues in Ethiopia now?
Not a lot. They got ruined with time, but you can still see on some of the villages in very, like my parents from Gondar is a very Jewish area in Ethiopia. So you will see some buildings that you will see like foundations of synagogues, or building that used to be synagogue, because you see the Magen David or you see things, but there is an Ethiopian community, Jewish Ethiopian community in Addis Ababa of the Jewish people who wait to come to Israel, that Israel is like struggling with bringing them. So there's synagogue there too, but not as used to be. Yeah.
The woman up front had a question. Go ahead.
Hi. I've heard the Jews of southern India referred to as the Bene Israel, B-E-N-E Israel, and our speaker from Ethiopia mentioned the Bene Israel. So I'm wondering if you two could define that term and tell us what they are.
Sure. So,
Okay.
so the India has 3 distinct communities, and more recently 4. The Cochin Jews from the south, the Bnei Israel, I'm from the Bnei Israel community, the largest community from the Mumbai area, the Bnei Menashe, who look like Chinese Jews from the northeast, who have been recognized about 20 years ago, and they have been migrating to Israel. And there's also a small community called, who call themselves in mid-southern India, called Bnei Menashe. I'm sorry, Bnei Ephraim. And we do not have contact with them. The state of Israel has not yet, there are a few hundreds of thousands of them. The state of Israel has not yet recognized them. But our 3 communities or 4 communities have our own institutions, our own synagogues. They were built by, a couple of hundred years ago, centuries ago, by our own people. Like, there were no Jewish missionaries that came to India and built synagogues for us. So what we have on the ground, especially in Mumbai and its surrounding villages and Cochin, is our own heritage, our own Sifrei Torah. We still have a mohel who does Brit Milah. We have shokets. We have, and Hebrew language is passed down generations from parents and grandparents. So as said, we speak with Dad in English because English is the only language that binds India. We speak with Mom in our local language, and then we pray in Hebrew. And
I think a woman in the second row had a question.
She has
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just say
go ahead.
there are like the Indian Jews called Bnei Israel, like sons of Israel.
Yes.
And we call Beit Israel, like the house of Israel.
yes.
It's different in Hebrew. We call Beit Israel because that's how, I don't like, it's just how they call us when we got to Israel. And I think it's because we carried, after the destruction of the first temple, like home is here, and then we carry with us the house of Israel, the land, the house, the home, until we got back. Yeah.
Did the woman in the second row? Yeah, go ahead, and then the guy in the back.
So thank you for this discussion. It's been really just enlightening, and thank you for
Miss Sullivan,
sharing all
this
of
is
these
my
Jewish
card.
traditions.
I would love to be in contact with
A
you.
little bit niche for Elliot, but I think
also have a
maybe
word
that's
Come to my
something that
Hanukkah,
also wants
come to.
speak to it.
We,
You know, as a community,
I see your names on placards, and I'm very proud of.
Oh, thank you.
and so
No, no,
as
you
a-
send me your
Hanukkah,
contacts.
it's a
Sure.
challenge.
Thank you.
So with these very layered, textured communities that you have in your temple in particular and in your communities, and what kind of rabbinic leaders do you look for as you're trying to hire? Because there's so many things to consider. And we, with Rabbi Hannah got so lucky here, right? We found the right person through this congregation doing a really thorough search. But there's so many things to think about, and there may or may not be, just as the priesthood and others, may or may not be as many young people coming up and coming through rabbinic training or religious training. What do you look for when you do have to face these decisions of trying to build out your religious leaders?
So it's a spectacular question, not an easy question at all to answer, and it's a particularly relevant question. We just had a rabbinical candidate land from London about 3 or 4 hours ago, so I may be meeting him hereafter. But I actually did an event at our synagogue about a week or two ago to highlight this very matter to the community. I sent out a survey to everybody, and I consolidated those survey results and presented them, not with regard to any one rabbi, but with regard to what do we want in a rabbi. And the diversity of answers was tremendous. The easy questions, general age ranges, et cetera, but then there was one section, what prioritized these 9 things in terms of what's most important and what's least, whether it's ability to read the Torah, whether it's the chazanut, the way he leads the service, whether it's adult classes, whether it's classes for kids, whether it's, whatever it is. And I mean, the answers were all over the place. And then you add in the fact that you have this tremendous diversity in terms of observance, where you have a strong, or a handful that's extremely observant, a handful that's not at all observant, but still tied to the tradition, then everywhere in between. So it's I think, but one of the things that came out and that was elicited in the commentary is the warmth of the individual that everybody's seeking. And so I think that what it comes down to is a certain personality type and a certain ability to inspire. And now for people on this side of the spectrum, the more observant, you may be inspired with a little bit more Talmudic knowledge and ability to cite specific elements and teach really more niche and specific matters. But people on this end of this spectrum, I think you need to nourish their soul, and I think you need to be able to nourish their connection to Judaism and that which inspires them to choose every day to be Jewish. People at times throughout history had a choice about whether to be Jewish, but so often it wasn't a choice. You were Jewish. Period. End of story. You were in this small enclave, and that was the end of it. But today, we have to choose to be Jewish every day. So I think in the end of the day, it comes down to the personality. It sounds like you guys found the right personality, and I'm hoping we do too.
Guy in the back.
All three of you, are you familiar with Kulanu, and to what extent are you involved with that group, if at all?
I'm not familiar with
I'm familiar with Kulanu. They have trips to Africa. They go to Uganda, to the Abu Dhabi community. They also have invited our Indian Jewish Rabbi Romuald Daniel, who's president and rabbi of the Rego Park Synagogue in New York. They have invited him to speak. They try to connect with Jewish communities that are small and isolated in Africa, in and they try to promote. They'll get Ethiopian Jewish speakers sometime. I've heard of Kulanu. It's kulanu.org. Kulanu is all of us. Kulanu, yeah. I have heard of them.
I had heard of them, but I'm truthfully not familiar with them. But once I
Yes, second row, Michael.
I'd like to know whether there's any movement in your three communities towards a more egalitarian leadership between men and women. I mean, in the United States, that's one of the really important developments and movements. And even among conservative Jews now, there are more women who graduate from Jewish Theological Seminary than there are men. So the rabbinate is fundamentally changing, and that's partly in response to the spirit of egalitarianism, and it's partly also because the more we get women leaders, the more that there are going to be women who are not rabbis who are also leading services. So it's a critical issue, and it's an issue that divides a lot of very Orthodox Jews and more liberal Jews in the United States, and I know that it causes a great deal of angst in Israel, and I'm just curious to know whether you see any changes in that direction.
So I can give you an example of what we were, even when I was growing up, even before that, my grandparents, great-grandparents' generation, our synagogues in India are built when we were more in number. So the ground floor was all men. There used to be a women's gallery on the top, and that's where all the women would see. But there was no mechitza, there was no curtains. You could see your mother, your sister, or your wife in the balconies above you. And that's how, now that the communities have shrunk, men sit on the left-hand side, women sit on the right-hand side of the bima. Again, there is no mechitza. And we have a unique custom where especially after Shabbat service, or after high holidays, we have something called the clasp of peace. So we hand each other's hand, like this, and then we kiss our own fingers. It is to show brotherhood, community bonding. About women, I can be very honest in saying that in our India, the only time the women come on the bima is for the naming ceremony, and then for marriage ceremony. There are no women rabbis. For us, this is and even Israel is ruled by the Orthodox community right now. Again, if you ask any Israeli or any Indian Jew, it doesn't really matter, because remember, we're all Jews. And the strength of our people is because we are a matriarchal community. Remember, mother is Jew, child is Jew. It's not patrilineal. So for us, we take it for granted that we have powerful mothers and sisters and wives, as in all Jewish communities. Now, whether they're able to pray or not pray, it doesn't really matter to us and doesn't really matter to them. But in terms of running the house or I can guarantee you that with personal experience, that women folk drive the community. Even with the Ethiopian community, it is, and even in my home, I'm out here. It's my wife with the two little boys, bathing them, cleaning them, taking their homework, it is the women in our communities are and that is what distinguished us from many of the local communities back in our countries of origin. Thank you.
I don't say that in my house my mom is she's the one who makes the decision, not necessarily the one who will bet us, or they both do it. But in synagogue, yeah, I think we're still very, very traditional. I don't see, we have our kesim, our rabbis in Israel, that they don't, the Israel Rabbanut, the law, don't see them as, I can get married with a rabbi, with the Ethiopian rabbi, our kesim in Israel. But we don't have, women don't do, we're not there yet. I hope one day, but for now, we're not there. but that's just with, when we talk about rabbinical and everything, you see the very differences in how they put like women on the, like that, like in the synagogue they are in the first level and the men's in the lower level. Yeah.
We've seen women a lot more stepping up in terms of the leadership of the congregation, so on the board and whatnot. But when it comes to the parochial, we're traditional, for better or for worse. And I say that because, for example, I know that my sister no longer comes, one of my sisters, no longer comes to Magen David because she wants to sit next to her husband and she wants to be in a more egalitarian setting, and I completely respect that. That's her preference. In terms of our community, there's still a tradition. The beauty and at times maybe the Achilles heel of our community is the adherence to tradition. I always say that we're a community, we're a synagogue of immigrants. And where those immigrants are coming from is changing over time. But we're a synagogue of immigrants because you don't, it's an embassy of sorts, our synagogue. You don't really feel like you're in the United States as much anymore when you're in there. It is a little bit of that old world feel. And I don't foresee that changing in the near future.
Well, we called the event from 7 to 9 p.m. It's a little bit after 9. And I take it, Alan, we don't have questions from the internet that are pending, do we?
Nope.
So, okay. I'm sorry. This is a question from Gabriella, who I think is maybe a member of the Hill Havurah on her way back from New York. This is a question for Elliot. Since Sephardic Judaism transcends the denominational divisions created by Ashkenazi Judaism, what seminaries are compatible with your community? Would a graduate from Yeshiva University as a modern Orthodox institution be suitable for your community?
Well, actually, this also refers back to or relates back to the question that was asked prior about who is the ideal rabbinical candidate. Because of also what I spoke to about Judaism becoming a little bit more homogeneous in terms of the melting pot, melting everything together, the easy answer, but that doesn't really go into the detail of it, would be yes, a Yeshiva University grad, an Orthodox. We are a modern Orthodox congregation, and as most Sephardic congregations are, and therefore graduating from an Orthodox institution of that nature would, yes, qualify the individual. However, today's Orthodoxy does not accurately fully reflect the diversity of our community, and therein lies the difficulty. Therein lies the fact that you do have a good portion that walk those 20 feet, but no further. The 20 feet, the 20 feet is from their car to the synagogue. And so that's one of our challenges in terms of having that traditional synagogue, having that synagogue that's true to its roots, but that is also reflective of a diversity of observance that increasingly has gotten swallowed up into the race for who is more religious than who, I guess. I don't know.
Elliot, for those who aren't familiar with the difference, could you tell us the difference between modern Orthodox and traditional Orthodox?
I think that modern Orthodox is inherently just more progressive, more open to modernity. I mean, we're not, there's a rabbi I respect a lot. He recently passed, the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of England. Tremendous mind of our day, I think, and I know I'm not alone. But he was asked about, for example, the Charedim, the Hasidim, the very ultra-Orthodox that walk around, in the black suits and the white shirt and the black hats and this and that. And he said, one of the things that is so unique about Judaism is our ability to change and our ability to adapt. And so he said, so I hardly think that walking around in the same garb that people did 300 years ago is reflective of that Jewish spirit. And so I think that the difference between traditional Orthodoxy, where and modern Orthodoxy is an adjustment or an acceptance of the same things that the Sfaradim did in the Arab lands prior, which was finding a better balance, a better Judaism life balance.
We have one more question, and then we'll have to end it. This is from our board chair, Marlene, and this is for Sigal. What's the situation today for Jews waiting to emigrate from Ethiopia to Israel?
It's very, very complicated, but they are living two communities, one in Gondar and one in Addis Ababa, and they are waiting for the Israeli government permission to bring them to Israel and include them in the Israel society. It takes time because the Israel government trying to understand how to do it, and like if they're Jews or not, and how to deal with the situation because of it's a huge country of Christianity in Ethiopia. It's one of our biggest struggles in Israel as an Ethiopian community, because we don't understand why people question it. For me, from the other side, I think they should, like I used to work as an educator. One of my girls, she is today is an officer. She's an officer in the army. She served the country. She was born in Ethiopia, but she's like very part of the society. And her big brother is still waiting in Ethiopia. So it's a huge, very painful point that we struggle with in Israel as a community. But I hope now that we have a Knesset member, Ethiopian Knesset member, two actually, but one is very powerful, amazing woman, Prina Tamanshete, that she is the Sarat HaKlita.
Minister of Absorption.
Yeah, so I hope she will manage it, and we will succeed with bringing our brothers and sisters still in Ethiopia. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's have a warm round of applause for our fabulous panel, and also for our wonderful sign interpreter who was up here the whole time all by herself. Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah.